My name is Steve Rude. And I was in comics for so long. You know, I'm not the kind of person that anticipates, you know, what direction may come up in life, you know, anticipating changes or anything like that. I just kind of live for the moment. And as long as the moment's okay, I'm fine. Of course, I'm filthy rich because of it. No. I never made a whole lot of bread. I just was very artistically and creatively satisfied. If you don't have something that makes you overcome hurdles in life, you will trip and stumble and never want to get up because it's too much work. And to me, obstacles were something in my way. If they were in my way, I had to find a way to get them out of my way. I did decide to go into gallery/fine art. And what that really meant was there would be no money coming in at all from any source until I sold my first piece to the galleries.
Has inspired hundreds to take up the pencil, and it's probably inspired thousands to put down the pencil.
Because he's, at heart, a born artist.
He's the top of the field. He's going to go down in the history of comic books.
He's one of the best artists in the industry, but he applies a type of nostalgia to his work.
Steve brought classic American illustration to comics. Steve was the first guy that I saw doing oil paintings.
You know, what good was I to anyone? All I could do is think of, all I could think about was dying, because that was the only thing that that there seemed to be offered to me.
There was also that crazy side of Steve too, and a lot of creativity. I don't think would come out of him if he didn't have some of that. We all have that, man.
His moods. Yeah, whenever he stomps, it is so loud, it comes from downstairs to up, and sometimes he breaks a wall.
Yeah, that's me. That's what the Mormons fixed while they were here.
This one here started out as a little crack. One elbow thrust. Boy, these things are cheap. Now look what it's turned into. Thanks, you fucking shrinks.
I don't think we use the word depressed. He was a problem in Escanaba with his sister, but I didn't really associate it with being depressed. I probably wasn't looking for it.
That wasn't really talked about that much. Well, I mean, I'm sure it was, but not within our circle.
I never knew anybody who was depressed.
The first time I saw him really get angry, we were living in
in our apartment on Huntington Drive in Arcadia. And he got mad at something, and I was walking around in the apartment, and all of a sudden this step stool came flying down the hallway and missed me by like inches, scared the heck out of me. And then from there, he just marched right into the bedroom and crawled under the covers, and I think stayed there for 2 or 3 days.
Ordinarily, I would just go out to my room, close the door, and say, "Fuck you, world." Once again, you're just pissing me off to the point where I can't take it anymore. I spent just enormous amounts of time in bed. The bedroom was the only place I could go to survive this problem.
His special projects tend to drain everything. Because of him working on his Nexus animated project, we almost lost the house at least twice because he wants everything done in professional quality, which isn't a bad thing unless you don't have the finances to back up professional quality.
I'm assured of the inevitability of success. I have great confidence in myself and my work, and I know that what I'm doing is at the top of my profession personally right now because I'm 53 and I've spent all these years trying to get good, and it's time to show the world a different aspect of what I can do.
It's like Steve. He makes up his mind to do something, he's just going to do it, you know. That's the way he is.
The art form is really lucky to have had Steve Rude for the amount of time that Steve saw fit to contribute to it.
When the painted covers started coming in, it became an event to open a package from Steve. Because all work would stop in the studio and everybody would gather around. It got to the point where if anything stopped work in the studio, the publisher would be aware that there was some kind of commotion going on. And he said, like, "Is there a package from Rude?"
A lot of hard work, a lot of imagination put in these things, and a lot of a very strong sense of design in there. And totally unique to him. It's Steve Root, you know, it's all him.
He's an artist. He can do it all. Any media, any form, put anything in his hand, he can master it.
I became an artist because it was in my bloodstream from the very beginning. I was an eccentric dreamer. And I always would look at something and it would have an emotional pitch that was higher than, say, how someone else might interpret it. Right to our left of the drawing board here, we have my reference files. And they contain things like poses of girls, poses of guys, animals, vehicles, weapons, a bunch of comics over there that I've kept for my entire lifetime because they're so great. There's some great Kirby paintings up there that I love so much. Always there to look over me as I'm doing my thing every day. My oil painting area. That's what I'm working on at the moment right now. It's halfway blocked in. On the easel, there's my chair. The back broke off. I guess I abused it too much. You can see I actually started off painting all this from life, and then I'll take photos, the actual area that I use as my palette. Everything is arranged by color, chromatically. Lights to yellows, the oranges, the reds, the browns, the greens, blues, and black, and then another white to mix in with the cool colors. And up here is where we do all the painting. Here's some insert shots of some of the paintings that I've been working on. There's a closer view of the face. Very simple light source, very selective edges. Make sure you do good feet, because if you don't, you're an amateur. Here's the actual first painting I did of this cowgirl here. This isn't what it started out looking like. It started off with an entirely different pose, and I didn't like it. So I brushed the whole thing off with a rag, and I started over, and I did this from my imagination right here. And this is what I call carrying realism to the 50% point that I see in my head, and then I'll rely on photos or life studies to work out the actual details. But the gimmick of this thing is just featuring her smile by obliterating everything else in just shadow. Here's a painting that was done from life. I painted this pretty young 17-year-old girl in my studio here while her mom watched. Hey, you can never be too careful, right? This is log 28, meaning that I have 28 of these books right here. That's kind of the way the books start out, but you can see a lot of notes that I used myself. It's kind of like using myself as my teacher, since I'm the only one available to teach myself at times. A lot of studies, a lot of studies. Gino, Princess Gino Ginelli, the girl I married, says, it doesn't have to be perfect. A lot of things that you see here are things that I do in the very beginning of the day. I warm up with them in the morning. Caricature is a great way to figure out realistic drawing, because it's realistic drawing reduced to very cursive sweeps of the pencil. Here's a baby's head. Most artists are very weak on babies, and they have a structure to their head like everyone else does. More ideas from Toth model sheets. These great creatures he thought up that I draw. I guess I'm trying to assimilate them in my head when I draw them.
Steve and I met back in 1991. At first, I just liked the fact that he wasn't drinking and getting drunk like everybody else. After that, it was just, I thought he was a very handsome, very funny guy. And I just got to know him and just fell in love with his just kind of quirky personality.
I have endeavored to invent my own exercises here in the backyard of the dude. Be sure and bend at the knees. You can pick that up. You ready? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I never pole vaulted, but I always thought it was fun. So anyway, let's give it a shot here, okay? This is for you with everybody you want to go hardcore. It's truly harder than it looks.
That's just who he is.
He's the most unique person I ever knew, because on 1 minute he could be on this TV show talking like some scholar over this in-depth introspective stuff and everything, and the next minute he's down the street playing with some 10-year-olds at their level, you know, and he could cross over in a minute. It's the most unique thing I ever saw in my life. And some of my friends would meet him and he'd like, well, he's out to lunch. Yeah, it's funny.
I said, so Janelle, seriously, how is it with Steve? He can be different. And she's like, oh God, yes. And she said, one time I caught him staring at the wall. I just walked into the room and Steve was just, you know, and she said, I knew he was deep in thought and he was pondering, you know, he was picturing a painting. He was picturing something in his head. He's just staring at the wall and I was looking at him, waiting for him to break this sort of creative trance so I could ask him about, you know, the laundry or the garbage or the ice cube tray. And Steve's just looking at the wall and she said, all of a sudden he just broke out laughing as if the wall had told him a joke and Steve had gotten it. And Steve was just sitting there and you know, Steve just started laughing and she said, I almost left him.
The first time I met Steve was at Janelle's graduation, and we had about 30 minutes to get to the graduation, and Steve comes out in a pair of jogging shorts, and he says, I'm gonna get the weed whacker and mow the lawn, and then I want to go on a quick run, and then I'll be ready to go. And I was, I thought, well, maybe I didn't hear what I thought I heard, but now I know I did hear it.
By that time, I already really, really liked him, so it was kind of a little too late to kind of turn around and go back. But I was very glad that he had never been married, didn't have kids, no baggage.
I did not want kids. I never did. I wanted Janelle, and that was it. She said she was pregnant, and I was like kind of quiet for a long time. I just, you know, tried to comprehend that as able as my lizard brain was able to, that I was going to have kids, which was the worst fear of my life, is to have kids. I thought I was going to have to live, I thought I was going to have a kid that was just like me, and I'd have to live my own life all over again through this kid. See him make the same mistakes. I uttered these profound words in the form of, this kid is either going to save me or destroy me. The last thing I wanted after I had one kid was another kid, but once again, my reluctance to play by the rules screwed me. I was supposed to go in and get clipped, you know what they do to guys, you know, so they can't impregnate girls anymore. Hell, that was one of my best pastimes. Well, anyway, they gave me too many papers to fill out, and I just told them to go to hell. So I missed the date that I was supposed to go in, and consequently, along comes super little Keed.
My name is Brandon Rood, and my sister here is named Jessica Rood. Stop being silly.
My name is Jessica Rood.
I just told them that.
What are your nicknames?
My nickname is Super.
Also, my dad called me Trandon.
That's his nickname.
Yeah.
One of the things I've tried to do over my entire time with being with Princess is communicating better. And what I mean by that is, it means communicating better. And it's such a simple word, and yet I've known Princess since 1991, and all I can think of is that I've pretty much failed at every attempt I've ever made to get into her person and get her to talk to me like the way I want people to talk to me. The two aspects of things that can accrue when you become successful, which is accolades and money, I got one of those. Comic books were appreciated. The people that created them were ultra appreciated. The award ceremonies were formed because of that appreciation, which is not something that comic books had ever had before until the advent of conventions that began in the 70s. By the 80s, conventions were rolling along big time, and everyone wanted to be a part of them. And it wasn't until the crash of the 90s, which I suppose is an inevitable development of every part of your life, I guess, at some juncture, that things went sour.
Did he tell you much about Memphis? Yeah. Our trip to Memphis was interesting.
I thought I was going there for a convention and a tour of Graceland, the Graceland Mansion. But I ended up getting kind of stalled by the local airport security police.
To say it completely freaked me out.
So when I got off that damn plane, I just fell on the floor and just said, "The hell with this shit." Well, that was a red flag to cops.
So they arrested him.
They took me into a place where they thought I would be safe. Well, that turned out to be a mental institution in Memphis, and just about that time, I'd been recalling this moment where I was actually with some of the inmates that they shove into this nut house, and one of them told me his name was, of course, Jesus Christ. Well, I was just overjoyed to meet Jesus because I've been waiting to meet him all my life, and I never have. So we chatted for a little bit, and so with that in mind, when these guards eventually came back and started to, give me a lot of grief for kicking on the door, which I was so hoping I could kick down and get out, they started telling me about the virtues of believing in Jesus, and if I just believed in Jesus, everything would be just fine. Well, I said, well, hell, that's good to know because I just met Jesus. He's in the other room there. You should go talk to him.
And they refused to call his doctor.
They eventually let me out, but one of the funny things that happened was there was a nurse there. Everyone was a black person in Memphis that worked at these mental health places. And one of the black nurses came up to me, and she was talking to me about what I did. She was apparently writing all this stuff down. She goes, "Oh, you're a comic book artist. Wow, that's really exciting. Can I look you up on the web?" I said, "Well, yeah, I think I'm on there." So she comes back, and the next thing I know, she's got a piece of paper. She wants my autograph. So I give her my autograph. Best wishes, It's been fun. Steve Rude, hope I see you again someday. Here's 2 passes to the show this weekend, which I'm about to miss. I remember for the first time in my life, I tried to sue the city of Memphis for whatever I could sue them for, wrongdoing or whatever the legal term is for it.
We just were not able to find anybody who was willing to take the case on, and so in the end it went nowhere, and we weren't able to get Steve any compensation.
I grew up with a great mom and dad. I had, I came from a family of 6, 2 brothers and 1 sister. I had all the friends I could ever want.
I first met Steve about 45 years ago, and it was in the 3rd grade. Interestingly enough, we had been drawing for the teacher, Mrs. Olson. And she paired us up because we were the 2 best drawers or artists in the class.
He really didn't do that well in school. It was okay, but he wasn't into schoolwork that much. He just wanted to draw, draw, draw.
Things that happened during the time I was growing up affected me traumatically, and they aren't things that other people would think twice about. But I remember in my backyard one time, there was some stupid dog attacking some baby robins, and I went crazy, screaming. I was so traumatized by these little birds being hurt. I'm sure the dog must have had them in their mouth or something. I remember somebody had a tennis racket and he was trying to hit the blowhard and get the bird out of his mouth. And I'm sure my mom saw right away what she had with me and thought, oh, here comes trouble.
We moved from Madison when Steve was about in the 5th grade. And as it turned out, he would have been happier staying in one place, going to school in the same vicinity, because he didn't adjust well to moves.
A lot of good things happened in Waukesha, but moving was traumatic for me. It didn't seem to bother my brothers or my sister. It bothered me a lot. I think it affected my life in a not so good way, in ways that I wasn't able to perceive until many, many years later, when I thought a lot about it and the friends I left behind and the things that could have, should have been, I thought. But some of the good things that did happen in Waukesha was we got a dog named Ram. Now, Ram wasn't a real name, but that's what I called her. I think it was short for rambunctious. And she was my substitute for lack of real human companionship. Another thing that was really a good thing that happened to me in Waukesha was scouting. The things I learned in Scouts were to have a great effect on me, a very lasting effect on my way of thinking. Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Yeah, okay. And then from Waukesha, Wisconsin to Escanaba, Michigan, where I spent my high school years. Escanaba was such a small little town. And I remember we had this great 2-story house that was up on this bluff with a golf course and a country club. And to the other people that lived down in the suburbs, it was a rich person's place to live. Of course, which it certainly wasn't. We were just middle class all the way. But when you live in a little town like Escanaba, you can appear to be rich and not really be. And I remember the feeling of running out to the mailbox and seeing these big manila packages stuffed with comic books. The magic feeling that came over you, the rush of, oh my God, they're here.
A lot of his morality has come from, those epic battles of Marvel Comics where he sees good and evil, and that defined his character. And that's interesting that you use comic books as your gauge for what's right and wrong.
they were this, this path to the greatest place my mind could ever want to go to, which was one of other worlds and incredible action, excitement, and superheroes fighting and battling the bad guys and the monsters and how they were going to get out of the stuff. And the great artwork that I love to pour over and try to copy in my little typing pads that my mom would supply me with. There was nothing like that was any cooler. That was the apex, the pinnacle, the paragon of coolness to me.
When he got out of high school, he did go to, at that time it was called Milwaukee School of the Arts, but they discouraged him from doing comic books, and he had already decided that's what he would like to do.
After this art school that I went to in Milwaukee, I moved down to Madison permanently.
He always wanted to go back to Madison. It was like, that was the root of the problem, leaving Madison and where he was, that was his element, growing up to, of course he was, 12 when we moved to Waukesha. Just leaving Madison, it was like leaving utopia, where all of this network of these, nickname friends and all the stuff he would do, and where he learned art or discovered art and all that, but he always wanted to go back.
After he left art school and had a job, he decided he didn't want to go to art school anymore and he didn't want to work. So I kindly asked him to leave. And he got in his car. His grandpa had sold him for $400. Went to Madison. I think he slept in his car a couple nights.
So I'm working in this little studio one day, and my mother knocks on the door. And she says, Josh, was my nickname. She said, Josh, there's some big, tall guy out there. Said he knows you. He calls himself the Dude. I walk out there, and there he is, Steve. He's gawking around. He's big, tall, 6 foot, what are you, 6'6", 6'4"?
Now, the first time I'd gone hitchhiking, and the only time I'd gone before, was out to see Paul Glacy in 1977, 76. When I just knew I had to go or suffer.
I said, hi. He says, is this where the Big G lives? I said, yeah. Paul, you mean Glacy? Are you the Big G? I said, yeah, I'm Paul. Oh my God, this is Big G. Hi, I'm the Dude, man. How you doing, man? How you doing? I said, well, who's this? Did you drive up in this car? He said, in this car behind Steve in the driveway is this other guy like laying out on our front lawn with his feet in the air, he's rolling around. I said, well, who is that and what's he doing? He said, I don't know. I think he's so tired of driving. I hitchhiked with this guy from Madison, Wisconsin. I said, well, what's up? He said, oh, he's just tired. I think he just wants to stretch out. You don't mind, Big G, do you? I said, no, that's cool, man. That's all right, whatever. So the guy takes off. I waved to him. Steve was waving. Come on in. And then my mother gets in there. Steve, you must be dead, tired, and starving. I just cooked a terrific meatloaf. Would you like to hang around for dinner? And I go, God damn, huh? Look how, what are you thinking?
My life could never be played out as it was to be if I had not done those things that I was internally directed to do. And that was another of the several times that I had in my life where another moment like that took place. And it was very, very direct and very, very audible in a non-verbal kind of a way. And it told me that I had to go out again hitchhiking. And little was I to know, but that moment was to end up with me meeting Janelle. And that was going to change my life in its absolute entirety. So funny how that works. I'm no more able to explain this condition than any of you are, and really nobody can. But again, it's another part of the sketch line that forms the eventual, very clear picture that makes up your life.
After knowing him for about 6 months, 7 months, I thought this guy is such a character, and I made films. And I thought we got to do something. The first one was called Le Dude, because the big hit on the radio back then was Le Freak. So we started calling him Le Dude. Super Dude, we were kind of waiting on the idea. He made up this superhero costume. The story goes he tries to commit suicide because he's got no money, nothing to live for, and these aliens come out of the sky and come down and choose him to bestow superpowers on him to save the world. So he's got these superpowers and runs around saving people. And we kind of lost interest, so there was only about 10 minutes of that made.
That's part of the inevitability of living, is you're going to intersect with people and things that affect you in a really good way.
But one day while I was working, I got a call from a friend of mine who was a newspaper editor, Dave Wagner. And he said, there's a guy down here trying to sell cartoons to our newspaper who draws just like you, which is a big joke, of course, because I can't draw. So I arranged to meet this fellow, Steve Rude. We met on the steps of the Wisconsin Student Union in Madison, and he opened up his portfolio, and right there I decided to give up drawing, because even then he was like, how old was he? 25 or 26 years old. His style was so advanced that it was enough to discourage lesser pencilers. So I met Dude, and we were of like minds. We were both comic book fans. He wanted to do comic but didn't know how to write. I wanted to do comic, I didn't know how to draw, so we teamed up. The first thing we did was that insurance salesman story for Pacific Comics. It was about a guy in a post-apocalyptic future, which is kind of like the United States today.
They were kind of a Mutt and Jeff couple, Mike and Steve, and they were very different because Mike was very intense in his own way, and I guess you could say Steve was intensely laid back, but they were very much an odd couple.
We had heard that some fellows in town were looking to publish. This was in Madison. So I sought them out, and they were Milton Greep, John Davis, and Richard Bruning. And Milton and John were co-owners of Capital City Distribution, which at the time was the second largest comic distributor in the world.
We had basically a one-bay warehouse at that point. We had a little second level where our office was, and I remember them coming up to show the Intergalactic Encyclopedia to us. So that was the first time we'd met them.
And Milt said, we need a costume superhero. So I went home and my brain was cooking. I wanted to create something compelling, so I decided to make the guy an executioner. Every time he shows up, somebody dies. That makes for a gripping story right there, if you can justify it. And such was the beginning of the Nexus character.
Mike went off, and I don't remember how much longer later, but not terribly long, came back with the first 7, 8 pages of Nexus drawn by Steve, and his grand scheme, Mike's grand scheme for what this character was and what he was going to do.
Backstory on Nexus, whose real name is Horatio Hellpop. And Nexus's shtick is he dreams of mass murder. He's visited by dreams of the most horrendous crimes in the universe. And he sees who does them. And when he wakes, he needs to track those people down and kill them, or the dreams will keep coming back and they'll get worse and worse until the dreams kill him. Dave is probably the closest I've ever come as an homage to another character. He is, and Dude has always said this too, he's Nexus's Spock. That was Dave's function. I think I initially drew him as an ape because Dude was very fond of that style. Steve is constantly sketching and he loves those ape-type forms, which is where Dave and Judah came from. Judah arose out of a need for a boisterous, larger-than-life personality. And that's the way I conceived him from the beginning. Somebody who was loud, proud, and good. And of course, Sundra was in the very first story because you have to have a female character as a counterweight to Nexus, or else you just end up in male vengeance territory. I took all my existential angst and gloomy Russian literature and put it in, and Dude took all his Hanna-Barbera and Alex Toth designs and put it in. So we had this clash of aesthetics, which I think has contributed to the success of Nexus over the years, in the fact that it can be both very serious and very light, often in the same story. Most of the seriousness is mine, most of the lightness is Dude's.
Steve's art is really the key. Mike's writing was very good. I think Mike has a visceral style of writing that's very appealing. But Steve's art was, I believe, the key to Nexus.
Steve's work was very strong and bold, classic, and didn't look like he was copying anybody else. So within the independent comics world, this was really quite a big book. It was very, very popular. It didn't sell gangbusters, unfortunately, because we had very little marketing dollar.
Frankly, they didn't know how to run a railroad. The book came out sporadically every 2 or 3 months or 4 or 5 months or whatever, and the format was always different.
The thing about Nexus is it always sold as a back issue, too. So those first 3 black and white issues were extremely collectible. But, you know, if you laid those side by side, you'd see Steve's work just take off and just really progress through the series of 3.
We just all knew he was gonna be something someday. We knew it, and he knew it.
He was always taking drawing classes. He was taking figure drawing classes, and he worked a lot. Steve, you didn't see Steve out at night much because he was probably home working on his drawing board. The black and white comics of that time, Nexus was really one of the leading comics.
And Steve, he got more and more confident of his work.
Steve was an artist, and he really did have that, you know, puffed up chest, I'm 6'6", out of the way, artist is approaching when we go down the street. And it was literally like Moses in the Dead Sea. People would part when we'd walk down State Street, and he was walking straight ahead.
First he was Steve, then he became the Dude. Right, so that's right. That's right. The Dude says, you talk about the Dude in third person.
Steve would walk in a room and say, "Enter the Dude." So he was definitely the Dude, Steve the Dude Root.
This persona, the Dude, that he created, who's bigger than life. I mean, his weightlifting was kind of part of that. I mean, his body was bigger than life, super tall guy, super well built and put together, and his art was bigger than life. He was drawing on cosmic subjects, and the Dude was sort of a self-pimp in a way. You know, he was kind of making fun of himself a little bit, but also convinced you every time he said it that he totally believed he was the Dude.
Doing that book was what put me on the map and got me every single job that ever came about because of the good work on Nexus. And I'm very grateful for that.
First comics was one of their early so-called independent comics. They were not Marvel and DC. By definition, they were other.
By the time he had gotten in a few issues of First Comics, he really took off, and he was just doing his own thing, and it was just top quality. I mean, there were a few people who were working at, I think, at the level he was.
Oh, I was blown away by Steve's drawing. He was so far and away superior to much of the newsstand product of the time, of the 80s, certainly to the submissions that were coming in across my desk daily. And more than that, he was his own thing.
I wrote an issue of Nexus where it involves the chancellor of the University of Wisconsin. And Dude is such a stickler for accuracy that he took his sketch pad, he went down on campus up to Bascom Hill to the chancellor's office, and there was no one outside, so he just walked in. He walked in the office, the chancellor was behind her desk, and he sits down in a corner of her office while she was on the phone and starts sketching. So she hangs up the phone and says, "Excuse me, can I help you?" And he says, don't mind me. I just need to get a drawing of this office building for a comic I'm working on.
what is it about the way this guy draws anatomy? And that's the thing that struck me about Steve's artwork at first. I was like, I don't understand this. This looks really cool. This Horatio character looks amazingly heroic, you know, in his blue and black tights with his little lightning bolt. But he doesn't seem like a comic book superhero. He looks like a real guy. But he's not done photorealistically. At the time, I was learning the ropes from a comic book artist named Neil Vokes. What is it about this guy's artwork that's blowing my mind? I can't wrap my brain around it. And Neil just sat there penciling and said, he's classically trained, and went back to drawing. And I was like, what does that mean? He goes, it means he studied stuff other than comic book art to learn how to draw people. And I was like, you can do that?
And this was stunning work to me. First of all, it was a monthly book, and a lot of the issues, Steve inked his own work, but he also did a painted cover for most of the issues, and it had this classic gold key kind of feel to it. But reading the series, you also found that the guys that made this Nexus comic book loved a lot of the same things that I did, the classic television science fiction that was waiting for me in syndication when I came home from school.
And it had something in it that harkened back to visceral memories of Star Trek, you know, Space Ghost, Herculoids, you know, sort of like almost schlocky movies that you'd see on the weekends at your grandparents' place on a Saturday afternoon, where rocket ships go to the moon and there's big Martians and, you know, this kind of stuff. And there were, like, in the truest and most positive sense, it was wholesome.
I knew when I first saw Nexus, it was a very striking departure that basically, it was the flag that kind of waved that said the 80s had begun and the old way was out.
I knew by the mid-80s, as I was still drawing the book, that this truly was the book that I wanted to be on my gravestone. If I was going to be known for anything, it was going to be Nexus. It was an independent book. It was created solely by two guys that loved comic books, that were not part of a big conglomeration of Time Warner or Disney. And we're just doing it for the pure fun of it. Now, Baron and I got lucky. We advanced artistically in a seeming exponential way. And that was good. We got a lot of press for that. We got a lot of awards for that. And that was all wonderful. It was just, the 80s was the best time to ever be involved in comic books, I think. There came a time in the Nexus days when I was starting to get some very nice, some very generous offers to work on books for other companies, and one of those was a book called World's Finest.
We looked for a long time how to bring back Superman, Batman under this World's Finest banner. It's a very hard thing to do a story with Superman and Batman in it because they are very different. But this was one of those successful attempts at it that made us think, you know, with the right people doing it the right way, you can make these two characters work ultimately.
comics. He's very passionate about comics. He's so visual that I think sometimes he might have a problem with words. I remember in the script that I wrote him for World's Finest, which admittedly was a pretty detailed and comprehensive script, he would phone me up and ask me just to read what I had written as a panel description. So I would read it word for word, but there was something about me reading it, and perhaps in an English accent that gave it a bit of authority, that he found he could then understand, whereas the words on the page, he couldn't quite take them in. When I saw the first batch of pages from Steve, I was just blown away, because I knew that he could draw the superheroic figures. I knew that he would absolutely nail Superman and Batman, and he wanted to do the classic Superman and Batman. He went right back to their earliest incarnations.
I was kind of shocked when I got kind of a dressing down from the editor about how my versions of these characters just didn't work. Batman looked like someone who couldn't be recognized because his ears stuck out from the sides, and Superman just didn't look like Superman. Superman had a much longer waist, Steve, than the one you're drawing here.
But the storytelling and the little bits of business that Steve added to it. There's one particular scene where Lois Lane is blowing her hair up out of her eye because she's a bit perplexed about something. I'd never asked for that. I'd never described it, but it was exactly the right thing for Lois Lane to be doing. So Steve made me look so good. He added so much to my story. I'd put a lot of detail in, but he added even more to it, even more atmosphere. He differentiated really clearly between a sort of gothic darkness of Gotham City where Batman lived and the bright idealistic metropolis where Superman came from. He gave me stuff that was beyond any expectations, and he sent me the thumbnails he'd done and the character sketches. You know, he really gave this job 100%, couldn't have done more, and I couldn't have imagined anybody making a better job of it than Steve. As far as the critical reaction to World's Finest went, it seemed to be quite well received. It didn't win great accolades at the time. Everybody who bought it loved it. People were complimentary about the story, even more complimentary about Steve's artwork, which I think absolutely shone. And I think the interesting thing is that book has been in print for a long, long time. They did a deluxe edition of it recently. I get people come up to me and ask me to sign it, and they say, this is my favourite Superman and Batman book of all time. So you can't always correlate sales or huge critical acclaim to the pleasure it gives people.
Thing that impacted me is probably his work on World's Finest miniseries, which the artistry towards that was helping to awaken in me a sense of how I might bring my own creative view to these classic characters.
I didn't really hear about Steve Rude. I discovered him as a retailer and picked up a magazine with an odd company logo on top, Capital. It was magazine size, and it was black and white, and it was called Nexus. And I read the first story by Mike Barron and Steve Rude, and I was immediately taken with Steve's art style. Of course, it's evolved over the years, and Steve has progressed as an artist over the years. But I instantly became a Nexus fan, and I followed his work, as well as the Nexus series, over the years.
Well, when first started Circling the Drain, Mike Richardson had always expressed his enthusiasm for the titles, and I believe he stepped right in and said, boys, we'd like to publish you. And that was fine with us. I've always liked Dark Horse. We have a wonderful relationship today, and I have to point out that Mike gave us the copyright and trademark to those characters back after we had sold them away in our youthful enthusiasm. And that's virtually unprecedented in the world of entertainment. So we own Nexus completely outright thanks to Mike Richardson.
Because of our admiration for Steve's work and because of our faith that in an arrangement with Steve, we could regain some, if not all, of the money that we spent. We were eager to do it because it was my opinion that if the sale went through, they'd never get the chance to have the character back. As a result of a deal that followed that return of their rights, we've been publishing Nexus for quite some time from that. Unfortunately, the sales hit a level at some point that we had to cancel the book.
The problem with the Dark Horse books, I think, was Dude could never keep to a monthly schedule, so those books never came out on time. And it may be that 4 issues a year is simply not enough to sustain enthusiasm.
I tried for years and years. Steve and I discussed a Nexus film because I think it'd be an amazing, amazing movie to watch, and I think that it's so appealing. The material itself, there's great depth to it, beyond what you find in most comics. The characters have real arcs, and the story has some great twists and turns, and I just think a great movie could be made out of it. We have a deal at Universal right now. We're hoping to set the film up there at Universal. We're working hard at finding just the right writer and the right director to come on board.
Steve Rude is one of the great comic book artists.
We're sitting here because when I went in to meet with Mike Richardson, it was just a general meeting, you know, Dark Horse wants to meet you, so forth and so on. And they've got a bunch of stuff, you know, various books and things that they're, you know, they want to see if that'll kickstart something, you're interested in this. And I went in and I sat there and I was very polite and I said, okay, great, this stuff's all wonderful, I'm sure. I said,
what are you guys doing with Nexus? And it turned out that Mike had, I think, taken a shot at it a long time ago, but he told me they didn't really pitch it anymore. They were waiting for someone to come in with a passion for it. And voluntarily sort of suggested, which I did. And he got very excited and said, oh, you know, we'd love to. Are you a fan? And I said, yes.
A long time ago, when I was working for comics, I made a proclamation that I would never work for Marvel. At the time, they were mistreating Jack Kirby in a way that I thought was just kind of unforgivable and incredibly short-sighted, and I still believe it was. I have no reason to change my opinion. I said I would never work for these bastards. I would never work for Marvel.
He called me up one night, we were talking about the book and comics, whatever, and I think he talked for 2 hours straight on the phone about the issue of Thor from the 1960s where Thor meets Hercules. And just pontificated for hours about this one comic and the levels that were contained within, and not just artistic, but in the story and how much it affected him. And, you know, I'd read that issue and I thought, okay, it's Kirby and it's Thor and it's Hercules and they throw down and it's a great comic. It's a great Silver Age superhero comic book. But Steve had so much invested in that comic and was willing to share that. I mean, I was sort of touched and a bit scared at the same time. That, you know, I was like, wow, this guy's intense about that one particular comic.
So I actually got a phone call from one of the editors over there, who was the super nicest guy.
I always wanted to see Superman versus the Hulk.
He was working at Marvel Comics, this is what he told me. He said he'd looked at Marvel Comics the past decade, basically the 90s, and was appalled by what he had seen. These were not the Marvel Comics that he loved and that he had grown up on. And he felt, in his words, a responsibility to come back and show the current Marvel readers, the current generation, how it's done, or how it should be done. And I was like, fucking A right, man.
And it was a combination of those things that brought about my consent to say yes to working for Marvel. And for a while there, it was a lot of fun.
I mean, it's definitely one of the most acclaimed crossovers that had been done. I think it was actually the last one that had been done, if I'm not mistaken. It was the last one to come out.
They weren't as creator sympathetic as they could have been. So even though they were happy to have Steve Rude, drawing for them, they were not happy with the schedule. And books were being turned in late. I think the 3 issues that came out took about 10 months to come out, where they should have come out every month. And so they're on Steve and, just up his ass about getting things faster. And Steve was like, look, it's going to happen when it's going to happen. I didn't make the schedule. Marvel editors made the schedule. The gauntlet he threw down to Marvel was, I understand the deadlines, I'm going as fast as I can, but I'm not going to rush the work, and I'm also not going to quit. So you do what you have to do. I'm in this for whatever it takes. They fired Steve Rude.
Unfortunately, somebody like Steve, starting out in really virtual freedom, that other people had to fight for to a certain extent, represents a very strong point of view that he's right in everything, and some people do, that you have the right to make all the decisions, and if somebody pays you money, they don't get a right to make some decisions. Sometimes you're pushing it.
It was not a good time. I got out, and I've never looked back.
He did what he set out to do. He went back to Marvel. He drew all the iconic characters, probably of his youth. He drew Hulk, the X-Men, the original X-Men, Spider-Man, Thor, Captain America. I think he said his piece.
That was also one of the contributing reasons why I'm no longer in comic books, is because of the time I spent at Marvel.
Steve could have worked and thrived at Marvel in 1968, alongside John Romita and Jack Kirby and John Buscema and all those guys, and Jim Steranko. Or at DC alongside Neil Adams. I mean, he really has that retro sensibility, and I miss that.
There's also something that I have to take either some credit or blame for. I drove him real hard to think about self-publishing. I don't know how much he's enjoyed that, but I enjoyed the process. I'm not doing it now, which might be telling.
Steve told us he wanted to start publishing himself, the Nexus comic, and maybe some of his other characters. And it's a tough market. I guess my words to him were, it's going to be very tough, and be careful.
So one of the things that I tried to use as a remedy was to form a production company called Rude Dude Productions, and that was basically just me doing the comic books that I wanted to do, rather than rely on a company to publish my work and possibly risk the chance of cancellation after an issue or two. And I just didn't want to go through that again. So I formed my own thing, and as anyone knows, that when you form your own thing, one of the things you need is to shut these fucking dogs up here. Shut up, you dumbass. Shut up. All right, go chew on a milk bone. When I was doing the Rude Dude stuff, one of the things we instantly revived was Nexus. And I just thought, well, this will be easy. I've got Baron, who's never let me down, and let's just pick up where we left off. And it was exactly 10 years, almost to the day, that we picked up Nexus from the time it was canceled in 1997 to 2007.
The only thing that affected our relationship was when he decided to become publisher. He began to unilaterally edit the scripts without consulting me, and that led to some friction, but ultimately we worked it out.
I received kind of a shock in the way that Barron's writing style had changed. It altered itself so drastically from the scripts that he was turning out for a good 25 years between the two of us. And I didn't know what to make of it. I knew there was something very unsettling about the style that he was now writing. It was so sparse that it was almost it sucked all the character out of the story.
He ended up pulling the entire print run, and we ended up having to come up with extra money out of pocket. Of course, sales were already down because we had canceled and resolicited once. Now we're on the second solicitation, we're going to be late, and we're canceling the next book because he hadn't finished it yet.
I decided to end the book. Mercifully end the book at that point, and knowing that nothing was going to change. And knowing that is what gave me the wisdom to stop it now, before it could get out of hand, because it wasn't going to get better. It was only going to get worse. And life's a funny thing. You get all these things thrown at you, and you don't know what to do because at least half of life involves decisions that you just don't know what to do. And the only guide you have, I think, that I figured out is your conscience. Your conscience is kind of this inner thing inside of you that knows the answers. And if you're just calm enough and composed enough to listen to it, which often it's hard to hear it. It's buried so deep that you just, there's a lot of things on the surface that interfere with the voice that's deep inside of you, and they fight all the time. What do you do? Which one do you listen to? I don't know. I think the only way to evaluate these things is just make a decision, and time will tell you. Time will always tell you if you did the right thing or not.
Right now, we're just starting to recover from the last of the publishing expedition. The publishing started out really good. I had told Steve to wait a year before he had, until he had the entire series done. And he had wanted so badly to do a free comic book day. He says, no, I need to come out with Nexus in this year. And I said, well, free comic book day is coming up, but I think it would be better if we skipped a whole year and did the next free comic book day. He said, no, we need to do this one. So we did the free comic book day. Everything went great. Sales were fabulous. And then Nexus 99 came out, and sales were really good on that one as well. He came out on time, no problems, book paid for itself, no worries. And then we got to 100 and the Sundra Painted story. And he was having so many problems getting faces right, getting angles right. So therefore, the whole book was delayed. And then that would get him upset, which would get him depressed, which would send him to bed. And, so that whole yo-yo of emotions made it was an 11-page story, and each story, I think I figured at one point, was taking him an average of 6 weeks to paint.
I was basically incapable of working. There wasn't anything else. I was non-functional, completely and utterly non-functional. And the only way I could function was to take myself out. And I went in the drawer, got out there's a really big knife, you know, a knife that was meant to cut through some pretty heavy-duty stuff. And I went over, I sat down with this knife, and in the complete silence of night, I just thought about what I was about to do. And I saw in my mind a knife, the knife I had in my hand, plunging through my arteries, and blood gushing everywhere, or just hopefully it wouldn't gush. It would just you know, kind of leak out, and there wouldn't be spraying everywhere. Yuck. And you know, Janelle, you know, in a couple minutes I would, you know, the life that keeps you alive with the body that you have would be gone out of me. It would all be drained. There's something that people need to know about this problem that some people have in the world. This, you know, this so-called melancholy, depression, whatever the hell you want to, you know, put on it. You don't care about your wife. You don't care about anything but stopping the sense of being in hell. In the end, you realize how completely and utterly alone you are. I think I see something here. At this drawing board, I'm fairly in charge of things. I don't have any boss other than myself. Steve Rude's a good guy to work for. He gives me good hours. Lets me take time off when I want to for naps. There's no severance pay, but, you know, at least I'm a free man. That's why the dude here is quite happy working for numero uno. I answer to me, and that's probably the only guy I should be answering to.
Back in October of 2010, our house was going into foreclosure, mostly because of the switch that Steve's doing, going from comics into fine art was a tough switch. I'm behind him all the way on it because he's such a talented artist, but it's a tough switch. And he has turned down some bigger jobs to be able to work on stuff. But the fine art career, again, it's putting together portfolios. It's, you know, we've entered competitions. He's been accepted over the last 2 years to only 2 of the competitions that we've entered. But I look at it as, well, he's been accepted into 2. And everything is based on the judge.
I did come to realize that as Steve has tried to make some transition from comics to gallery types of art, it was interesting to see that he is actually capturing in some of these scenes people. He's actually capturing emotion, and he's using real objects, real people. You know, not Batman, but a butler. And you can actually look at them and say, I almost think I can see what's going through their mind. It actually has given me a chance to say that, well, whatever skills and abilities are used to create that stuff that he does, it's allowed him to really make it some steps into what I consider the real world and actually capture real people, real things.
Of course, Steve has all the skill in the world to be one of the best fine art painters as well as best commercial painters. But who is buying that stuff? When it comes to fine art, Steve explained to me that recently, he explained to me that he's going to fine market and he trusts his instincts and he's going to have, you know, he knows what he's doing is right, and he's going to make billions off of this. And I thought, well, you've never made billions on anything before. Where's the billions coming from? So I know it pure. He mentioned the word billions. I'm not making that up. And I just thought, like, you don't want to be soft sell this, maybe thousands at first, you know, just.
That any money came in during the time of this assault on the fine art world is through commissions. So thank God I've got fans that have kind of been with me for all these years that want to pay me to do drawings for them. These are a lot of fun. This is my only attachment, my only umbilical to the world of comic books right now is to do these fan commissions. And thank God they're fun, and I enjoy them a lot. And they're always a challenge for me to pull these off. There's no such thing as sleepwalking through a good drawing. You have to basically summon up everything within your memory, seeing how these are basically memory drawings, and seeing what's in there, seeing what you can pull off based entirely on your lifetime of memories of drawing and what's been able to stick into your head as far as all the things you've learned to study.
Right now, what he's doing, which has actually been really good, is he's doing black and white marker commissions, and the color, he'll add color to them for an extra charge, which has been really nice. He agreed to do, you know, say 5 of those a week, and that if we get enough coming in, enough commissions on our list, then that should mostly keep us afloat.
Steve spent much of the last several years doing pinups and commissions of these characters that the company owns, but he could have been doing all that work on an official basis with them if he just found the right level. That level might be, hey, maybe I only want to do covers, give me the classic versions of the characters and leave me alone, and I'll give you what you want. It's a great way to make a living. It's one of the ways I've been able to survive myself.
Sometime in 2009, and the intent was to hire Steve for a TV series we were going to be pitching. And we got in touch with the dude, and he was, as always, very gracious, and he liked our idea. We left Arizona with the understanding that Steve would have, I don't remember exactly, 12 or 13 or 14 illustrations ready for us to enhance our little TV pitch. He, with great regret, resigned from the project. This is the email that Steve wrote to me. Hi, David. It appears as though my once reliable service in making deadlines is not as it used to be. All my old skills are there, but are being blunted by these damn disorders. Janelle mentioned the other day that with the speed at which I'm working, your pitch meeting will take someplace far down the line from which you want it. This is unacceptable to me, as I'm sure it is to you. Those sentences, I guess, are a little clumsy, but I guess he's in the grip of depression.
Definitely, Steve is commonly known pretty much amongst all circles as being difficult, and difficult is the most polite phrase. Head case would be another one. You know, a handful, all those different kind of things, but basically there's a lot of people that have wanted, I imagine, to approach Steve for various projects and things that have been told outright, don't even bother, it's too much trouble. It's more trouble than it's worth. And there's been a second life for some of this stuff in terms of Steve working between DC editors and Marvel editors and changeover of personnel, that there's always a new chance on the horizon to build a new reputation. But Steve hasn't necessarily wanted to meet that halfway.
A lot of people in the comic book field have offered me work, but I've turned it down because of the reasons I turned down work, period, which is it's just not a high profile enough job to take me out of what my preference is right now, which is doing these paintings of the girls and the sillies and just focusing on the stuff that makes me really happy and fulfilled right now. I don't care much more beyond that.
To this day, he says all he wants to do is draw. The money part isn't important to him. It never has been, and with a home and a family, it has to be important.
Because he's going into gallery art and he doesn't want to, give away his gallery pieces, he is currently pricing them at a price that they won't sell, which means we still don't have anything coming in.
She's probably working 2 to 3 jobs in addition to being the promoter and manager and marketing arm for Steve. In fact, one of the things that she's really gotten into lately is getting a real good understanding of what it takes to do good marketing.
Our house was going into foreclosure, mostly because of the switch that Steve's doing, going from comics into fine art was a tough switch. With the fine art, I know there's so many things that have to get organized on my end. I mean, Steve can crank out as much artwork as he wants to, but unless I'm able to take the time to do the portfolio pages and, do the prints and get the artwork up for sale and do everything on the after the fact that needs to get done, his career's never going to really go anywhere. So that's been our main challenge.
Janelle, she's just, pretty much does everything, with regard to the kids and the family. And I mean, Steve will check out at times. He'll just, he'll kind of get into his own world, and just kind of be off to the side. And she needs to be the way she is to manage that whole thing.
Yesterday, Janelle and I went to see a marriage counselor, an expert in the field of couples psychology. It was in Scottsdale. I had to drive about an hour to get there. It's in a fairly well-to-do part of town. Whole group of shrinks in one office. Imagine that. You think with all that collective brilliance and genius that so much good would be done for these poor couples coming to them for help.
When you started picketing, Dr. Earl, did they threaten you with arrest for trespassing or anything?
5 cops came by.
What'd they do?
Tried to arrest me.
Tried?
Yeah.
How come you didn't get hauled off in handcuffs then?
They figured they didn't have a case against me. Okay, we're done.
Okay.
Now, she's probably going to call the fucking pigs on this, so we're going to split, okay?
Okay.
He is hypersensitive to noise. And so the neighbor's dog that kept barking in the backyard was driving him crazy. And of course, it drives him even more crazy that when you ask other people about it, and even me, I'm like, no, I don't hear the dogs barking. And he's like, are you kidding? They're so loud. And it's just his hypersensitive. He's so hypersensitive to noise that it was literally driving him crazy, to the point that when he stopped taking his meds, he called the cops and told them that, I believe he told them that he had a gun and he was going to shoot the dogs. So of course that made him the criminal.
Let's hold on here. What the fuck is this? It's the goddamn cops. Can you believe this shit? Let's try to catch the fucker in film.
Hello.
Yeah, hi.
You Mr. Rude?
Yes.
I've spoken to you on the phone before.
Yes.
Need to talk to you about a couple of things. I don't know if you remember our first conversation we had about a year ago.
So this apparently bothered this stupid prick cop that came by. You know, Steve, it kind of bothers me that you're talking about killing your fucking neighbors and their dogs. And I say, well, why should it? You got a court injunction leveled against me to stay away from my neighbors because their barking dog, me complaining about their barking dog, is harassing them.
I think where our concerns are for our grandkids and for the spiritual welfare of our daughter herself.
Gino thinks the babies have to leave every time I'm going into one of my tirades about the fucked up world. But they're oblivious to me. They don't care. They're not even listening to me. They're playing their damn DS.
I'm the one trying to keep everything together, and it just gets overwhelming.
Well, the problem is me. I even myself out by communicating with people about deep things that are easy for me to do in my drawings, in my paintings, in my works of art, but trying to find people that you can do that with. Oh man, I mean, I don't know what world I grew up in, but I think I'm in the wrong world. I think I made a wrong turn someplace. Because everyone that I know is not anyone that wants to talk about deep things of life, things that help me get balanced, but I don't think anyone else wants to talk about them. I think people are scared by them. I think that when they hear them, they want to run. And so I'm just kind of left holding that very wet bag of 1,000 years of tears. I wanted to communicate with people. I wanted to try to figure things out, and I have yet to find a way to do it. Well, how many years is it going to take, for crying out loud? I've got one friend that I can talk to about this kind of stuff, and that's it. I want Princess to be a person like that, but she just doesn't have the psychological makeup to accommodate somebody like me.
The borderline personality part of him is always looking for that, always expecting somebody to leave. So it's leave before you get left. So he said, I'm going to go look for an apartment tomorrow. And then he went about changing all the filters in the house. So I had an appointment with my shrink, I think, the next day, and I said, he said he was leaving and said he was going to go look for apartments, but then he went and changed all the filters in the house. So I don't think he's leaving.
Yeah, it got so bad with Mrs. Yanis. I thought, well, my God, I'm gonna have to start my life over and move out. This is just the end of everything right here. I even wrote in my sketchbook. I said, this is the end. There's no way to work this out. And Janelle is just never gonna get it, and I'm never gonna get her to change. And I thought that was it. There's two things going through my mind. One was, could I even start my life over? And the second one was, how fast can I kill myself?
And he just got so fed up with everything and with being told what he couldn't do, because the narcissistic part of him is like, wait, I'm in charge and I tell you what to do. You don't tell me what to do, and you don't set limits with me. And I want you to be somebody that stands up to me, but not like that. So then I brought it up to him. I said, you've always told me you wanted you wanted somebody who could speak their mind and somebody who would tell you and put you in your place. And he said, yes, but you're doing it wrong.
Well, I don't think I could imagine myself as a failure. You know, when Rudes marry, they marry for life. And here I was looking at, you know, certainly not that. I was failing, and I didn't know how to deal with it. And I had my babies that, Christ, have we heard enough stories about kids growing up without a dad? It's just no way. There's just no way it would ever be okay. It's like that movie with Jim Carrey when he found himself not being able to lie. You know, he had this thing called the claw that he would do to his kid, and when his ex took up with this other guy and this other dumb shit tried to do the claw, you know, it didn't have quite the same ring to it, Well, try to imagine someone other than the dude bringing up Mr. Silly or Super Little Keed. You can't imagine it. Nobody could be as goofy as I am. Nobody could tell them the things that I would tell them. The world is full of idiots, and they would have to grow up with an idiot. That's just not right. What do you have in your hands? Huh? He's a little puppy?
Puppy.
What's his name?
Puppy. Puppy.
Well, I commend you in your originality, Mr. Silly.
My relationship with Steve has been an up-down relationship. I know sometimes my friends get really, really upset because, you know, they don't like seeing me in a situation where I'm basically a lot of times having to, you know, baby my husband. But, you know, I see the whole big picture. You know, the guy that runs in that's so happy to see me, and, you know, lately that's been more often than not. And, you know, I promised to stick with them through the good times and the bad times. And yeah, there have been a lot of bad times, you know, and for richer or poorer. And yes, hello. Are you ready? We're talking about our relationship. It's interesting, married to someone who calls himself the dude in public.
In public, no less. Not to be misconstrued as a lunatic.
Yeah.
At home.
He's an interesting guy to live with. No, I'm still wearing my pants.
Horny.
He's interesting to live with.
There's nobody more interesting, Ordis.
I have to say that I don't know if there'd be anybody more interesting to live with than you.
What do I care about the most, Ordis? Doing
good work. That's all that matters, is if the work is good at the end of the day.
In the couple years that I've been trying to get into galleries, absolutely nothing has taken place. And I'm not in the least bit bothered by that. I'm not really sure why, but you know, after all this time, I think I have a sense about how things are going to go. And finding the right person to team up with, to pair myself with, that's going to turn me into a so-called household word, is going to be a long and real slow process. And because I just know that intuitively, I'm just, you know, I don't sweat it. Because otherwise, it'll never happen. And I'll just keep painting away, you know, pursuing what I'm directed to do internally, and you know, being a poor, happy guy.
It's a goddamn cop, isn't it?
You ever seen what happens when a car hits a body at 65 miles an hour?
No, but I've been told.
Pretty much explodes. That's why pedestrians aren't allowed out there. Because someone's going to be paying attention to what you guys are doing, and everyone's going to start slowing down, and then they're going to get in a crash, and it's going to end up hitting you guys. And I'm sure you don't want that. Right? You don't want to get hit by a car, do you?
I'm thinking.